I walked in after a 12-hour night shift, expecting the usual quiet. Instead, the silence felt different, heavy. Haley was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table long past bedtime. She looked at me calmly, too calmly, and said, "Aunt packed Grandma's things and said Grandma doesn't live here anymore." Just like that, no tears, no drama. And in that moment, I felt something inside our home shift. This isn't just about a house. It's about old wounds, money, and the kind of choices that echo for years. The winter my father died, everything shifted. So fast, I barely had time to breathe. He went suddenly. A heart attack no one saw coming. One minute we were talking about routine things, groceries, the creaky back steps, whether the Patriots still had a shot that season, and the next, he was gone. The old house in suburban Boston, the one he'd lived in alone for years after Mom left, was suddenly just there, quiet, waiting. Because he never updated his will, the house passed to both me and my sister Lacey. Joint ownership, which meant every major decision from that point on would require both of us to agree. At the time, that felt manageable. We were grieving. Paperwork seemed secondary, but grief doesn't pause life, it rearranges it. Just a few months later, my divorce was finalized. It had been heading that way for a while, but losing my dad and my marriage in the same season felt like standing in the middle of a storm with no cover. I was suddenly a single mom with sole custody of Haley, no backup income, no co-parent to split school fees or doctor bills or the cost of shoes she seemed to outgrow every 3 months. Renting in the area would have stretched me thin, so I made the practical choice. I moved into the house. It wasn't just a financial decision, it was survival. The mortgage was already handled. The taxes were manageable if Lacey and I split them. The neighborhood was familiar. Haley could attend a decent public school. On paper, it made sense. But living there was different from owning it. Every room carried my father's fingerprints. His tools still lined up neatly in the garage. The kitchen drawers organized exactly the way he liked them. His chair in the living room angled toward the television as if he'd just stepped out for a minute and might come back to finish a game. Some nights after Haley went to bed, I'd sit in that chair and just stare at the quiet house. It felt like I was borrowing space from a ghost. To make it work, I switched to night shifts at the emergency room. I'd been a nurse for years, but the night schedule gave me something priceless: flexibility. I could get Haley to school in the morning, pick her up in the afternoon, help with homework, make dinner, then head into the hospital while she slept. On paper, it looked efficient. In reality, it was exhausting. 12-hour shifts under fluorescent lights, trauma cases, drunks, car accidents, the steady beep of monitors and the constant hum of urgency. Then driving home at dawn while the rest of the world was waking up. I'd slip into bed just as Haley was grabbing her backpack. My body never fully adjusted. Fatigue became a permanent companion. Coffee wasn't optional, it was fuel. But the paycheck covered the essentials. We weren't behind on bills. We weren't scrambling at the end of each month. That stability mattered more than sleep. The house, though, it needed work. Dad had done his best in his final years. But when your health declines, maintenance slips. Faucets leaked. Cabinet hinges sagged. The fence leaned just enough to make you nervous during a storm. I couldn't afford constant repair calls, so I learned. YouTube tutorials became my late-night study material. I figured out how to replace a garbage disposal, how to patch drywall, how to fix a running toilet without panicking. I made mistakes. I redid things twice sometimes, but every repair felt like a small declaration: I can handle this. Summer meant mowing the lawn under a hot sun. Winter meant shoveling snow before Haley left for school. Lacey sent her share of property taxes on time, and I appreciated that. But she didn't see the daily wear and tear. She wasn't the one hauling trash cans to the curb at midnight after a shift, or scraping ice off the windshield in the dark. Her life was different. Lacey built her world downtown in Boston: marketing, promotions, networking events that stretched late into the evening. She talked about campaigns and clients and conferences across the state. Her Instagram showed rooftop dinners and city lights, high heels and polished offices. She rarely drove out to the suburbs unless it was a major holiday. I don't think she meant to drift. It just happened. Our routines didn't overlap anymore. My days revolved around Haley's school calendar and hospital schedules. Hers revolved around quarterly goals and performance reviews. When we did talk, it was practical. Taxes, insurance, the roof's condition. There wasn't much room left for anything deeper. Meanwhile, Haley settled into the house like it had always been hers. She claimed a bedroom, filled it with school projects and posters, made friends on the block. Watching her thrive softened some of the weight I carried. Evenings before, my shifts became sacred: simple dinners, homework spread across the kitchen table, quick laughs about something that happened at school. Those small moments grounded me. The house demanded sacrifice. It demanded work. It demanded resilience. But it also gave us something steady. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't glow like Lacey's downtown skyline. It was quiet, solid, familiar. And at that point in my life, that was exactly what I needed. 2 years ago in early spring, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was halfway through folding laundry, already running through the mental checklist for my shift that night. But something made me answer. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Kendra. For a second, I couldn't place it. Then she said my name again. Softer this time, and the air left my lungs. It was my mother, Evelyn. 25 years. That's how long it had been since she walked out of our lives. A quarter of a century of silence. No birthday cards, no holiday calls, no "how are you girls doing?" Just nothing. And now she was on the other end of the line, like no time had passed. Worse over the past year. She mentioned worse over the past year. She mentioned doctors, limitations, medications I didn't recognize. Simple things: cooking, getting groceries, keeping track of appointments had started slipping beyond her ability. Her retirement savings were running low, faster than she expected. There was a pause after that, the kind where the real question hangs unspoken. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the same countertop she had once leaned against when I was a child, and memories hit me in sharp flashes. I saw her packing bags one afternoon. I remembered the sound of the front door closing, the way Dad tried to keep his voice steady when he told us things would be okay. She had chosen a different life, and we weren't part of it. Dad stepped into both roles without complaint. He worked longer hours. He learned how to braid my hair badly at first, then better. He showed up to school events, even when he looked exhausted. We didn't have much, but we had stability. And now the woman who left was telling me she was alone. I won't pretend I handled that call with grace. My responses were short, measured. I asked practical questions. What exactly were the doctors saying? What kind of help did she need? Had she looked into assisted living? She admitted she couldn't afford much, that she didn't really have anyone else to ask. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Anger was there. Of course it was. You don't erase abandonment with a single phone call. Part of me felt justified in keeping my distance. She had made her choice all those years ago. Why should I be responsible now? But another part of me heard something else in her voice. Not manipulation, not entitlement, vulnerability. Age has a way of stripping pride, and loneliness carries a tone you can't fake. For several days, I replayed the conversation in my head. I talked to a couple of colleagues during quiet moments at the hospital. I didn't give details, just enough to ask what they would do. Most of them reminded me that decisions like this aren't just about the past. They're about who you want to be moving forward. Haley factored into every thought. My daughter had grown up with very little extended family. Lacey visited when she could, but she had her own life downtown. Dad was gone. The idea of Haley knowing her grandmother even imperfectly pulled at me. Was I opening the door to more hurt? Possibly. But was I also closing the door forever if I said no? That question lingered. Finally, I called Evelyn back. My voice was steady but not warm. I told her she could come stay with us. I framed it clearly as practical help. Not a reunion, not a sweeping reconciliation, just space, stability, a roof. I laid out boundaries before she could even ask. Why, I work nights. The house runs on Haley's schedule. Certain areas are private. We keep communication respectful. We don't dig into the past unless both of us are ready. She agreed quickly. Too quickly, maybe, but there was no argument. No defensiveness, just relief. She arrived on a Saturday morning with 3 suitcases. That was it. 25 years of life, condensed into a few worn bags and a small cardboard box of documents. No furniture, no keepsakes spilling out of moving trucks. Just essentials. Seeing how little she carried unsettled me more than I expected. It spoke of a life pared down, temporary, unrooted. We carried her things inside in near silence. Haley hovered nearby, curious but cautious. I introduced them properly, though technically they'd met once when Haley was too young to remember. Evelyn smiled at her, gentle and restrained. Haley gave a polite wave. I had prepared the downstairs room ahead of time. Fresh sheets, a clear dresser, a lamp by the bed. It wasn't elaborate, but it was clean and functional. That first afternoon felt like hosting a distant relative rather than welcoming a parent. I walked her through the layout of the house, which cabinet she could use, where the cleaning supplies were kept, how the thermostat worked. I explained my sleep schedule and the importance of quiet during certain hours. She listened carefully, nodded, asked clarifying questions about laundry days and grocery lists. There was no pushback. In the first weeks, our conversations stayed strictly practical. Meal planning, doctor appointments, utility bills. She offered to handle small chores, wiping down counters, folding laundry, sorting mail. I let her, not because I needed the help, but because I needed to see effort. At night, when I left for the hospital, I felt the tension in my chest. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. I was leaving my daughter in a house with someone who once left me. But each morning I came home, everything was in order. Haley was ready for school. The dishes were done, the house quiet. We moved around each other carefully, polite, controlled. There were no dramatic confrontations, no tearful apologies, just coexistence. Sometimes passing her in the hallway, I'd catch a glimpse of the woman she was now. Smaller somehow, slower, less certain. It didn't erase what happened, but it complicated it. I kept emotional distance on purpose. Forgiveness wasn't something I could manufacture on demand, but I could offer structure, stability, a chance. Whether that chance would grow into something more, I didn't know yet. All I knew was that under my roof, things would be different this time. Clear lines, mutual respect, and no one walking out without a word. At first, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Evelyn kept to her downstairs room most evenings. Haley stayed close to me, watching from a distance, unsure how much space this new presence would take up. Conversations were polite, brief, careful, but time does something quiet and steady when you let it. By the time summer arrived, I started noticing small changes. It began in the kitchen, a baking dish. Evelyn was explaining how to season chicken properly, nothing fancy. Just salt, pepper, a squeeze of lemon, and a little patience in the oven. Haley listened like it was a science lesson. "Not too much," Evelyn said gently. "You can always add more later." There was no lecture, no grand storytelling. Just instruction, calm and measured. I didn't interrupt. I leaned against the doorway for a second longer than necessary, pretending to check my phone. Haley glanced up and grinned proud. Evelyn stepped slightly aside, giving her room to take credit for the work. That detail mattered. The recipes were simple. Baked chicken, potato salad, fruit, sliced neatly into bowls, but they became a rhythm. Haley started asking questions. "How long do you boil the potatoes? Why do you chill the salad first?" Evelyn answered patiently, every time repeating herself without irritation. It wasn't dramatic, it was consistent. Then came the card games. One evening after dinner, I heard laughter from the dining table. Real laughter, the kind that spills out before you can stop it. I walked in to see a deck of cards spread across the wood surface. Evelyn was explaining the rules to a game she said she used to play years ago. She let Haley win the first few rounds. Not obviously. Just enough to build confidence. "See," she said, "you're getting the hang of it." Soon, those games became routine. On warm nights, the windows stayed open and their laughter drifted outside into the yard. I would sit in my room at first, telling myself I needed the quiet before work. But more and more, I found excuses to linger nearby. Haley's smile changed that summer. It grew easier, brighter. She started coming to me after school with stories that didn't involve just classmates or teachers. Grandma showed me how to shuffle properly. Grandma said Dad used to hate losing at this game. Grandma makes lemonade the old-fashioned way. The lemonade showed up on the hottest days. Fresh, squeezed, slightly tart, served in tall glasses with too much ice. I hadn't tasted that in years. The first time she handed me a glass, our fingers brushed. We both hesitated, then nodded like we'd completed some small, unspoken exchange. Reading followed naturally. Haley had a summer reading list, and one afternoon, I came home early to find her stretched out on the couch, reading aloud while Evelyn sat nearby correcting her gently when she stumbled over longer words. There was no impatience in her voice, no sighs, just quiet encouragement. "Take your time," she'd say. "Sound it out." I stayed in the hallway longer than I meant to listening. This wasn't the woman who walked out all those years ago. Or maybe she was, but worn down, reshaped by time and consequence. Drawings started appearing on the refrigerator. Haley had always loved art, but now her pictures included 3 figures instead of 2. Stick versions of us standing in front of the house, one of them with gray hair. Evelyn would study each drawing carefully, pointing out details. "I like how you did the windows," she'd say. Or, "You remembered the flowers by the porch." Haley would beam. What struck me most wasn't big gestures. It was the steady presence. Evelyn wiped down counters without being asked, sorted mail neatly into piles, left small notes beside the coffee maker before I went to bed after my shift. Rest well. Doctor appointment moved to Thursday. Practical things. Useful things. She respected my sleep schedule, kept the television low, made sure Haley finished homework before screen time. If she disagreed with something, she didn't challenge it in front of Haley. Trust doesn't rebuild through apologies alone. It rebuilds through repetition. There were still moments of distance between us. We didn't sit down and unpack the past. We didn't revisit the day she left. That wound remained sealed, untouched. But something softer began forming around it. I started joining them at the dinner table more often instead of retreating to my room. At first, I'd sit quietly listening. Then, I'd add a comment, a question. Eventually, I found myself laughing along. The house felt different in the evenings. Not tense, not fragile, warmer. I noticed Evelyn asking Haley about her school friends by name, remembering small details from previous conversations, encouraging her to practice reading, suggesting walks in the park when the weather allowed. She didn't overstep. She didn't try to replace anyone. She simply showed up. And slowly, against my own guarded instincts, I let myself breathe a little easier. One night after another card game ended in dramatic fashion, Haley ran upstairs to grab something she'd forgotten. Evelyn and I were left alone at the table. There was a brief silence. "She's a good kid," Evelyn said quietly. I nodded. "She is." That was it. No grand speech. No attempt to rewrite history. Just acknowledgement. And in that small exchange, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't watching a stranger in my home anymore. I was watching my daughter build a bond that, imperfect as it was, felt real. Cautious trust isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It grows in kitchens and at card tables, in shared books and sweating glasses of lemonade on summer afternoons. It grows in the steady proof that someone who once walked away is now choosing day after day to stay. That fall, the shift in our home wasn't caused by anything inside it. It started downtown. Lacey called one evening, her voice tighter than usual. Her company had restructured. The department she'd led for years was downsized, and her position came with a significant pay cut. Same responsibilities, less income, no warning. Before she could fully adjust to that, her husband lost his job. A layoff tied to an industry slowdown that seemed to hit all at once. 2 incomes reduced to 1, and that one already shrinking. At first, she tried to sound composed when she told me. Practical, strategic. But beneath it, I could hear the panic she was trying to manage. Bills stacked up quickly. Mortgage payments on their condo, car loans, insurance, credit cards bridging the gaps between paychecks. She mentioned cutting back no more dinners out, no trips, scaling down everything they could. Then her focus shifted. One afternoon, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope addressed in her handwriting. Inside was a long, carefully written letter. Not a text, not a quick call. Pages. She had researched property values in suburban Boston, Demand was rising. Families were moving out of the city looking for space. Comparable homes in our neighborhood had sold for far more than we would have guessed a few years earlier. She broke down the numbers methodically. Current estimated value, projected sale price, fees, taxes, what each of us could walk away with if we sold and split the proceeds evenly. It wasn't emotional, it was calculated. She even suggested alternatives. Taking out a loan against the house's equity as a temporary measure if I wasn't ready to sell outright. Meeting with a bank for professional appraisals. Exploring options for everyone's long-term benefit, as she phrased it. I read the letter twice. On paper, it made sense. The equity had grown quietly over the years. The house wasn't just sentimental, it was valuable, a solution sitting in plain sight. But when I looked around the kitchen where Haley did her homework, when I glanced toward the living room, where Dad's old chair still sat, I didn't see numbers. I saw the only place that had felt stable after everything fell apart. Selling felt like erasing something final. This was the house where Dad held things together after Mom left. The house where Haley learned to ride her bike on the cracked driveway. The house that had absorbed grief and slowly made space for something warmer again. I called Lacey and told her no. Not harshly, just firmly. She didn't argue much on that first call. She reminded me we were co-owners. That Dad hadn't specified what to do with the property. That legally it belonged to both of us equally. I acknowledged that, but I told her I couldn't do it. Not now. Maybe not ever. After that, the messages increased. She sent printouts of recent sales in the area, highlighted profits other families had made. She emphasized timing. The market was strong now, but who knew how long it would last? Waiting could mean losing an opportunity. Each conversation circled back to urgency, debt growing, credit card interest compounding, stress affecting their marriage. She wasn't asking for luxury, she was asking for relief. And I understood that. But every time I pictured Haley packing up her room, changing schools, adjusting to a new neighborhood because of a financial crisis that wasn't ours, my chest tightened. The house was more than property to me. It was continuity. It was proof that despite divorce, loss, and long nights at the hospital, I had managed to keep something solid for my daughter. Lacey started using words like fairness and shared responsibility. She wasn't wrong. Legally, she had every right to push. Our calls grew shorter, cooler. Where we once exchanged quick updates about taxes or repairs, now there were pauses, heavy with frustration. I could feel her resentment building even if she didn't say it outright. Evelyn noticed, of course. She never inserted herself into the arguments. If I vented briefly at the kitchen counter, she listened quietly. No dramatic opinions. No taking sides. "This is difficult for both of you," she'd say softly. "Money has a way of pressing on old wounds." That was as far as she went. Sometimes I wondered what she thought, privately, watching her daughters circle a conflict over the same house she once left behind. But she kept her role neutral, almost careful not to disturb whatever fragile balance we had rebuilt. Lacey eventually scheduled an independent appraisal without me. The report came through email a few weeks later. The number was higher than even her initial estimates. For a moment, I hesitated. It was a life-changing amount of money. College funds, a safer cushion, freedom from constant overtime shifts. But then Haley overheard one of our conversations. She came into the kitchen afterward, eyes wide. "Are we moving?" That question settled everything. I knelt down and told her no, that nothing was changing, that this was her home. After that, My position hardened. Lacey's frustration became more visible. She accused me of being stubborn, of letting emotion block logic. I accused her silently, mostly of letting fear drive her too far. We weren't screaming at each other, but the warmth that had once existed between us cooled into something strained and brittle. The house stood unchanged in the middle of it all, quiet, solid, holding more than just walls. It was no longer just a shared inheritance. It had become the fault line. Kendra knew something was wrong the moment she turned onto the quiet suburban street. The house looked the same. 2 stories, pale, siding glowing under the porch light, but it felt different. Still. Too still. After a 12-hour night shift in the ER, her body was heavy with exhaustion. Her mind dulled by fluorescent lights and trauma alarms. All she wanted was the comfort of routine, Haley asleep upstairs. The low hum of the refrigerator, maybe the faint smell of the lavender. Evelyn insisted on simmering on the stove. Instead, the air felt hollow. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The living room lamp was on. The television was off. No voices, no clatter from the kitchen. "Haley," she called softly. A small figure appeared at the edge of the staircase. Haley stood halfway down the steps, wrapped in her blanket, eyes wide and rimmed red. "Mom," she whispered. "Aunt Lacey's here." Kendra's stomach dropped. Lacey hadn't called. Before Kendra could ask anything else, she heard movement in the hallway near the guest room. Evelyn's room. Then Lacey stepped into view. She looked polished, even at night coat, still buttoned hair, pulled tight, jaws set. The contrast between them struck hard. Lacey crisp and controlled Kendra in scrubs that smelled faintly of antiseptic and fatigue. "What are you doing here?" Kendra asked, already knowing this wasn't a casual visit. "I used my spare key," Lacey said flatly. The words felt like an intrusion. "You didn't answer your phone." "I was working," Kendra replied. "You know that." Lacey didn't respond. Instead, she glanced toward the hallway. That's when Kendra saw the suitcases. Evelyn's suitcases. They were lined up by the door like they were waiting for a cab. Cold rushed through her. "What is this?" Lacey exhaled sharply. "We need to talk." Haley shifted on the stairs, trying to be invisible. Kendra's voice hardened. "Not in front of her." "Fine," Lacey snapped. "Then tell her to go upstairs." Haley hesitated, looking between them. Kendra forced calm into her voice. "Sweetheart, go to your room. Please." Haley didn't move right away. She glanced toward the hallway, toward Evelyn's closed door. "She's okay," Kendra said gently. After a moment, Haley retreated up the stairs, but she didn't close her door all the way. Kendra knew she'd be listening. The silence between the sisters thickened. "You can't keep doing this," Lacey said. "Doing what?" "Pretending this is sustainable. Pretending she belongs here like this is normal." Kendra's jaw tightened. "She's my mother. She's a burden." The word landed like a slap. "Don't," Kendra warned. "She's not your responsibility," Lacey pressed. "You're working yourself to death. Night shifts, double shifts, fixing gutters on your days off. And for what? To support her." "I'm not supporting her. She contributes. She helps with Haley. She has nowhere else to go," Lacey cut in. "And you're letting that guilt run your life." Kendra's exhaustion flared into anger. "This isn't about her. This is about the house." Lacey didn't deny it. "You know what this house is worth now," Lacey said. "You've seen the appraisals. It could solve everything. For me, for you. It already solves everything for me," Kendra shot back. "It's stability, it's Haley's school, it's Dad's house." Lacey's expression sharpened. "Dad is gone, and that means we erase him." "No, it means we move forward." From the hallway, a door opened softly. Evelyn stepped out. She looked smaller somehow, cardigan wrapped tight around her frame. She didn't look at either of them directly. "I'll go," she said quietly. Kendra turned. "You don't have to." Lacey's eyes flickered. Evelyn's voice was steady but thin. "I won't be the reason you two destroy each other." "You're not," Kendra insisted. But Lacey stepped forward. "You are part of the problem," she said, not loudly, but with enough edge that it cut. Evelyn flinched, almost imperceptibly. Kendra felt something inside her splinter. "That's enough," she said. Lacey's composure cracked. "You think I want to be here doing this? You think I want to fight? I'm drowning, Kendra. Do you understand that? We are drowning, and this house could save us. So you come here?" Kendra said slowly, "and throw her out." "I came here to make you face reality." "And reality is what?" "That if I don't sell, you'll make this house unbearable." The silence answered for her. Kendra looked at the suitcases again. "You packed her things. She was going to have to leave eventually. You don't get to decide that." "I co-own this house," Lacey snapped. The words hung there legal, cold, and disputable. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. "Haley." Kendra's chest tightened. Evelyn moved toward the door. "It's cold," Kendra said instinctively. "I'll manage," Evelyn replied. Lacey opened the front door. A sharp rush of night air filled the room. Kendra stared at her sister, disbelief overtaking anger. "You're really doing this? I'm done waiting." Evelyn picked up one suitcase, then the other. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't ask for help. Kendra stepped forward, but she didn't know what to do. Physically, "Stop." Lacey dragged the suitcases back inside. The house felt like it had shifted under her feet. "I'll call a cab," Lacey said. "No," Evelyn whispered. "I'll walk." "It's nearly midnight," Kendra protested. Evelyn looked at her then. Not with accusation, not even with sadness, just resignation. "It's all right," she said. Those were the last words she spoke inside the house. She stepped onto the porch. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt louder than any ER alarm Kendra had heard that week. Silence rushed in again. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kendra heard it, a soft, broken sound from the top of the stairs. "Haley." Kendra turned. Her daughter stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Why did Aunt Lacey make Grandma leave?" Kendra opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because she didn't have an answer that wouldn't shatter something. Behind her, Lacey stood, rigid eyes fixed on the door, as if daring herself not to look back. Kendra felt shock more than rage now. Shock that this line had been crossed. Shock that the safe, grounded house she'd fought so hard to maintain could feel this unstable. Outside the porch, light flicked off automatically. The house fell into deeper darkness, and somewhere beyond it, Evelyn was gone. Uncertainty settled into the walls, heavy, suffocating, unresolved. Kendra stood there between her sister and her daughter, realizing that something irreversible had just happened, and she had no idea how to fix it. Kendra didn't sleep the night Evelyn left. By dawn, she was in her car driving slowly through streets she barely registered, scanning sidewalks and bus stops, as if her mother might simply be walking somewhere with those two worn suitcases. She checked the hospital first, old instinct, then the urgent care centers. Nothing. She called shelters in neighboring towns, her voice tight but steady. She described Evelyn's gray cardigan, her careful posture, the way she always thanked people twice. No one could confirm anything. 3 days passed like that, work searching, calling, coming home to a house that felt hollow. Haley asked about her grandmother every night. Lacey stopped calling entirely. On the 4th day, Kendra sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the stack of mail that had piled up during her night shifts. She wasn't even looking for answers anymore, just something to do with her hands. That's when she saw the bank envelope. It was addressed to Evelyn. Kendra hesitated before opening it. Then she did. The statement inside made her breath catch. A withdrawal, large. Nearly everything in Evelyn's retirement account. The date matched the week before the confrontation. Kendra flipped through the pages, her pulse pounding. Another document lay folded beneath it, a receipt from the town office. Property tax payment, past due balance cleared in full. Kendra's vision blurred. The house had been close to default. She'd known they were behind between her night shifts, Haley's expenses, and the tension over selling. She'd postponed calling the town clerk. She hadn't realized how close foreclosure had come. Evelyn had known, and she had used her last savings to stop it, not for herself, for them. Kendra sat there staring at the numbers. The house that Lacey wanted to sell. The house Kendra had fought to protect. The house their father had left them. Saved by the woman they had just pushed out into the cold. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone again. This time when she called the shelters, she had more urgency in her voice. She gave her mother's full name, her date of birth. Finally, one administrator paused. "She stayed here 2 nights," the woman said, gently. She didn't want to be a burden. She left on her own. "Where did she go?" Kendra asked. "We referred her to a low-cost nursing facility in the next county. They had an opening." Kendra drove there that afternoon. The facility was small and clean, but undeniably worn. Faded curtains, quiet hallways, the kind of place built for necessity, not comfort. When she reached Evelyn's room, she almost didn't recognize her. Her mother looked smaller than ever, oxygen tubing resting beneath her nose. The cardigan was folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Evelyn's eyes opened slowly when Kendra stepped in. For a moment, confusion flickered there. Then recognition. "Kendra," she whispered. The guilt hit like a physical force. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kendra asked, tears already falling. "About the taxes, about the money." Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "You needed the house," she said. "Haley needs the house. You needed that money." Evelyn shook her head slightly. "I needed to make something right." Her health had been declining for months. The nurse explained later. Heart complications, chronic exhaustion. The stress of the move had accelerated things. Kendra visited every day she could between shifts. Sometimes Evelyn was alert enough to play a quiet round of cards. Sometimes she only listened while Haley read to her from a paperback she'd brought from home. There were no dramatic speeches, no grand confessions, just presence. 2 weeks later, in the early hours before dawn, ironically, during one of Kendra's shifts, Evelyn passed quietly in her sleep. Kendra arrived at the facility still in scrubs, hair undone, eyes swollen from crying. Haley clung to her side. Lacey came too. They stood together beside the bed, the silence heavier than any argument they had ever had. At the funeral, the church was small. A handful of neighbors from the house, a nurse from the facility, one of the shelter volunteers. When the pastor spoke about sacrifice, Kendra felt Lacey stiffen beside her. It wasn't until afterward, when they stood near the gravesite, that Kendra finally handed Lacey the bank statement. Lacey read it once, then again. Her composure, so carefully maintained through the service, collapsed. She paid it. Lacey's voice cracked. All of it. Kendra nodded. She knew about the foreclosure. Lacey covered her mouth, shaking her head. I called her a burden, she whispered. I forced her out for a house she saved. The words dissolved into sobs. Kendra didn't pull away. Grief rearranges blame. It softens sharp edges. It exposes truths no one wants to see. She didn't do it for you or me, Kendra said quietly. She did it for Haley. Lacey looked toward her niece, who stood holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. For the first time in months, the tension between the sisters shifted. Not erased, but transformed. I'm sorry, Lacey said. Not defensive, not strategic, just broken. Kendra believed her. In the weeks that followed, they made a decision without arguing. They would keep the house, not as an asset, not as leverage, but as tribute. They refinanced responsibly, adjusted expectations, worked together instead of against each other. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a legacy. Haley taped one of her drawings to the refrigerator a few days after the funeral. It showed 3 figures holding hands in front of the house, a bright sun overhead. At the top, she had written in careful letters, "Grandma saved our home." Kendra stood there a long time looking at it. Forgiveness doesn't erase loss, but it builds something new in its place. Evelyn had not left behind wealth. She had left behind a choice. And this time they chose each other. Forgiveness arrives too late to change. Forgiveness arrives too late to change what happened. But it still changes what comes next. The house still stands not just as wood and brick, but as proof of sacrifice, humility, and second chances. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and consider subscribing for more stories like this.